Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Travis Steele, the Chief Architect for the Air Force and Space Force at Red Hat. Travis, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
Of course, there is so much to talk about. When the Defense Department released its cyber strategy in 2023, it relied on lessons learned from years of conducting cyber operations, and it also relied on close observations of how cyber was used in the Russian-Ukraine war. So let's start there. What are some of the biggest challenges the Defense Department has encountered more recently that are making cyber defense a lot more complex?
Sure. I mean, as you mentioned, right, from China and Russia, we've seen really sophisticated attacks, right? Their ability through the emergence of new technologies across multiple vectors has really become a challenge. When you couple that with the fact that every service in the U.S. government builds, maintains, and operates thousands of existing systems today. And those systems are relying on various sets of data, IT systems in the cloud, and software and infrastructure systems. That makes it the challenge extremely complex. So how do you manage that? How do you deal with those legacy systems? How do you protect, defend those systems? Those are big challenges.
Yeah, and we've been talking a lot about those in the last couple of years. Could you talk about this time, reflecting on the time since the release of the strategy? What maybe key lessons have emerged, and how are these insights, since the release of the strategy, shaping the current modernization and cyber defense efforts within the department?
Yeah, so I think there's been a focus on, resiliency and technology innovation, and how do we modernize these systems very quickly to be able to have the ability in a modern warfare perspective, right? So in tomorrow's war, especially against the great power competition, how do we update our systems, make sure they're modernized, that they're agile, and that they are responding to the activities that are happening, right? I think those are the lessons learned, those are the insights, and that has shaped and formed the strategy and certainly has informed where the investments will go.
In Given all of that, what kind of, steps for the Defense Department, what kind of advice would you have for the Defense Department moving forward, as we're looking at 2025 and beyond?
So, um, when we think about the modern battle space, having an edge strategy is really paramount because when the fighting or any kind of conflict going forward is going to happen across all domains, right? And edge is a big part of our fighting domain, whether it be cyber or space. And having that strategy is paramount. We've got to also make sure that as we're designing and deploying new systems and architectures, that we're using open concepts, open standards, building in redundancy and resilient concepts like fail open design, things like that. So, when you think about the systems, the networks that they're running on, uh, the applications and the workload that those warfighters are using. If we're not addressing all of those, then there will be gaps, and those gaps will weaken our warfighting posture going forward.
And let's talk about that edge strategy. Um, given given the challenges that you laid out, given the complexity of that environment, again, what kind of practical advice would you give the defense community as they're building more resilient networks capable of operating in those denied, degraded, intermittent, and limited environments?
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, your data and access to that data is critical, and the applications that you're utilizing for whatever mission set it might be, it could be operational, it could be some sort of back-end systems. If you're going to prepare you've got to develop your software in a way that's agile and more rapid. And so, what does that mean as well? Well, we have to have processes in place and capabilities that say that those development practices are going to ensure that we have the ability to, build an application, deploy it once anywhere, right? And those are going to be across disparate systems. So you need applications that work no matter where they are. You need applications that can survive at the edge when you've lost connectivity, you have really in a degraded, contested environment. So that application development process and the automation of that, and the and again, being rapidly able to deploy is very, very key.
And could you give an example of where the Defense Department is doing that successfully?
Sure. There's probably lots of examples. I think one really good example is maybe taking a little bit of the AI as an application, talking about the Stalker drone. Here you have a true edge device that's not fixed, right? It's mobile, it's always on the move, it's acting in real time. So think about real time imagery, collecting that, and having the ability, right, to understand what it's looking at, make informed decisions and information about that imagery. And if you detect or identify new things that aren't previously categorized, or there are not characteristics about it, how can you quickly update that, right? So in that example, you have an edge system that has an operating capability of real-time data collection, real-time processing, and the ability to update very quickly. So that's a great example that kind of traverses across the DoD and can be applied to ships right out at sea, to aircraft itself, to forward operating bases. But that's a really good example of where it's working really well.
And that's one area that I wanted to touch on. Could you talk about, some of the challenges that have emerged, or that the department has encountered as it's trying to deploy AI at scale?
Oh, absolutely. When we get past the buzzwordness of AI and everybody does AI now and wants to do it, the question is, what are you trying to accomplish, right? How is it going to help the mission? How is it going to help the warfighter? And so some of those challenges are just simply what is the data that you want to, for example, train on and have algorithms be built upon? And is that data relevant to your organization, to your unit, to your mission? Once you get past that, then it's about, well, how do you deploy at scale those models? What are the platforms, and do you have them in place that will allow you to easily and quickly deploy those AI models at scale, all of the tools, and that can be anywhere, right? Because we're talking public cloud, we're talking on premise, and we're talking at the edge. So those are real challenges that the services are certainly faced with today.
Yeah, absolutely. And before I let you go, looking ahead, what is 2025 shaping up to be like for the Defense Department in this space? What developments are you tracking this year?
Yeah, I think the message of the day is around, warfighting posture, making sure that the capabilities are being fielded, the investments that are focused on technical innovation, modernization, and AI. But that's fused with areas of R&D. That's includes 5G, right? How is that being deployed and accessible to make things more resilient and capable? And again, that cyber resiliency piece across all domains is huge because that is going to determine or limit our warfighting capabilities when we are contested and congested.
And just one last question. Could you talk about, what Red Hat is doing in 2025 to help the defense community in this space?
Absolutely. We're helping a lot of fronts across all of the service branches. And, it's Edge is a big part of where we're helping and driving new capabilities and innovation, especially around workload portability. And and what I mean by that is, so no matter where you are and your data is and your applications, they can run, right? And that's important for our strategy in enabling the warfighter. We're also helping in areas of automation. People think a lot about AI, but sometimes don't always think about the automation capabilities there. So, how do we infuse and make sure that we have a automation first approach to get after some of these challenges? So we're helping there at an enterprise scale. And then that deployment of, AI tools, models, and capabilities across multiple platforms, and bring your own models and things like that is a big area of focus for us, and where we're helping the warfighter um, navigate those challenges, right? Navigate, where do I start? How do I approach this? And how do I plan for that scale so I can meet the need that the warfighter has.
All right, Travis, so much more to talk about. We're unfortunately out of time, so let me thank today's guest, Travis Steele, the Chief Architect for the Air Force and Space Force at Red Hat. Travis, thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Of course. And I'm Anastasia Obis, and you're watching Federal News Network. Now let me send you back to the studio for more on the DoD Modernization Exchange.